But another quick bit of fun news that is reflective of the league as well is the announcement of the United States women's national team training camp roster. There are some international friendlies that are coming up, some exhibition games, quite frankly. And the first of four, 2 matches against Paraguay are coming up in September in Ohio. And a lot of this roster that got announced, Lisa, the core of it, obviously, is the Tokyo Olympians, right? A little bit of within their CBA, they have to go ahead and play some of these games and, introduce themselves as Tokyo bronze medalists. But within that, there have been, some injuries, right? When we talked about coming out and exiting the summer games, some of the injuries that came into light, some big names are going to be included in the training camp, but not necessarily be available for selection. So somebody like Alyssa Nair and somebody like Sam Mewis are going to be available for evaluation purposes in terms of their rehab progress of their injuries. Although somebody like Julie Ertz is completely unavailable from this moment at all. But in light of some of the absences, there's also a big name and somebody like Christen Press, who has made the decision for her mental health to opt out of these current friendlies. And that's a big one too. We've been talking a lot about player injuries and whether or not and how and when they're available. But a big thing I think that's very important that we haven't been able to take the time to chat about a little bit is the importance of one's mental health. And in adjacent to this announcement from U.S. Soccer, Christen Press went ahead and made an Instagram post on her personal Instagram talking about, her reasoning behind, postponing playing for a little bit while she steps away for a second on the international stage and takes some time for herself.
Yeah, the Instagram post was honestly really nice. It was a good look into Christen Press's decision making, just a snippet of what she said. Quote, "I've made the difficult decision to take some time away from the game to focus on mental health, spiritual growth, and processing grief." Of course, you can read her full message on Instagram, but the players, I mean, Christen Press, that was a shock initially for me to not see her name on the list, just based on everything that has happened, how she was brought into Tokyo and then the signing with Angel City. But obviously mental health comes first and foremost, especially for these athletes, and to have the wherewithal to understand that and say, I'm going to take a step back. And then other players missing from the list, I know we mentioned a bunch of them, but Megan Rapino, due to her injury, she's not going to be taking this trip. But Carly Lloyd, she'll be there on her retirement parade around with the U.S. women's national team, which is really exciting. So snag your tickets for these games because it will be good. But because of a number of players not on the roster, opt-outs or injuries due to that, it makes room for some other players, Sandra, which is so exciting, especially for the future of U.S. soccer and this women's national team, because as we saw after the Tokyo 2020 roster was put out, there was a number of players that were left off of that list that were, of course, upset about that and disappointed, but they went back to their club teams, especially within the NWSL, and said that they were not going to let this slow them down. They were just going to turn it on full power. A few of those being forward Sofia Smith with the Portland Thorns. We have seen her just explode over the last few weeks with the Thorns, getting goals, being so creative and dynamic in her play, really becoming a four-dimensional player on the field, not just sticking to one or two skill sets that she has. Another player, midfielder Andy Sullivan with the Washington Spirit, player that's been in and out of training camps with the national team. And now she gets a shot at another one. She was not in Tokyo, but she has proven that with the Washington Spirit over the last few weeks, she is a key pivotal player in their midfield, not just making plays on the ball, but she's the one consistent factor, maybe alongside Tori Huster in the midfield for the Spirit, that has just been tremendous over this season and especially the last few weeks. And then the last player that was a big shock, Sandra, I'm going to let you take this one because you're a big Chicago Red Stars girly. Mallory Pugh, she made the list. She's coming back. It's a comeback for Mal Pugh.
You know what? This season for Mal Pugh has been spectacular. I'll just use that word because it has been. This is a player who burst onto the scene very, very young and who is a player who is still quite young in the beginning stages of her professional career and playing development, and became a part of the Chicago Red Stars team via trade. And one of the big things in a lot of the early media availability with this player was to get into a place in a system where she can continue her development while still kind of rehabbing and kind of coming back from some of these injuries. And throughout this season, we've heard her say sort of how she's been feeling about playing in a lengthy regular season for the first time, quite frankly, in her pro career, because she has had to deal with a number of significant injuries in the past that have always sort of disrupted, her regular season playing time, whether it was with a team like the Spirit or Sky Blue at the time. But now being with Chicago and kind of having a full regular season under her belt, we're starting to see who Mallory Pugh is and what she can provide and how she can produce and how she can create. So Vlatko Andonivoski calling these three players in collectively isn't too surprising. Hearing him, state in the press release that a huge reason why they wanted to bring in some players were because they were out with some players for injury, so they had to bring additional players into training, but they needed players who were getting consistent minutes, seeing regular time on the pitch, and who were in form. So that's a huge compliment to these players who have been putting together very productive seasons for their respective clubs. Mallory Pugh, obviously one of those as well. But it's not too shocking, right? For me, as someone who's maybe covering the team a little closer than others. But I think in a window like this, right? It's going to be taking place in an international window where there are no NWSL games. There's going to be a domestic club break. And having a coach like Vlatko Andonivoski, that is something that we did kind of view as a pro for this particular coach when he was put in this position, was the fact that he did have such a big background in NWSL, in domestic club play, that he sort of understands and knows the importance and the value of regular, consistent club play. So even within all of the announcements of the roster, and including these particular three players, he says, hey, yes, we need them because they're getting consistent regular minutes with their club, they're in form, but they're also in the middle of playoff push. All three of these players who are playing for their respective clubs. So not only are they going to come in and probably get some training with us and also potentially see some match day minutes against a team like Paraguay, but they're in the middle of a push and we got to manage their minutes as well. So it's I feel like it's a nice mix of like mutual understanding on both sides here.
I mean, can you just imagine the forward lineup of Mallory Pugh, Sofia Smith, Lynn Williams? Like how fun that would be to watch, Sandra. I'm so excited to watch these friendlies. I really am.
I cannot imagine it. I honestly don't think I will believe it until I actually see it. If there is actually a scenario within these two friendlies where Lynn Williams, Sofia Smith, and Mel Pugh are all on the pitch at the same time, I don't know what we're going to see, but it'll be exciting.
We'll probably be freaking out in our respective homes watching these games, and make your way to Ohio to watch this, because if it happens in person, that's amazing. One thing that, Sandra, I want to pick your brain on, looking at these rosters and the names that have come out a few months ago before the Olympics, before Vlatko Andonivoski named his final roster for Tokyo, there was a number of players in the mix. One that we're not seeing here in Margaret Purce. And she has been plagued with injury over the last few weeks playing with Gotham. She hasn't been on the roster list. She hasn't been traveling due to that injury. Do you think that Purce would have been in the talks to join this core group were it not for the injury? Or why is she named off this list? Is it solely due to injury?
I absolutely think it's solely due to injury. I think prior to her picking up the knock that she did with Gotham, Margaret Purce was putting together the type of season that we were expecting to see post being left off an Olympic roster and going back to her club. So she picked up a knock, and unfortunately, it was a significant one. She's been out for several weeks now. But prior to that, she was helping produce some very good soccer for Gotham, and they were absolutely making waves and making noise during that Olympic stretch as a team to watch. And they've struggled a little bit in front of goal without her and her ability to attack and create. But I absolutely believe this is a player who would have been on this roster had she been able to participate. I don't think it foreshadows anything in terms of her being left off or not in the larger pool of things. I really do believe if once she rehabs and probably maybe looking closer to that 2022 camp, we're going to see somebody like Purse back into the mix for sure.
And the numbers will shake out as everyone knows. Sadly, Carly Lloyd retiring, so that opens up another space for the future. But these numbers will definitely shake out. But for this first international break in September against Paraguay, I'm excited for this lineup. I'm excited to see what Vlatko Andonivoski throws together and his 11 that he sees on the pitch. And we look at the goalkeepers too. That's something that I would love to see Jane Campbell get a full 90-minute
Yeah.
game under her belt, because it's 80 France right now, and Jane Campbell, Alyssa Nair will be going, but she's injured right now, so probably won't see time just as a safety precaution and minute management on her side of things. But I'd love to see Jane Campbell get a full game under her belt.
Yeah, if there's 2 games. So if it comes down to each goalkeeper getting a game against Paraguay, then I'm here for it. I think that makes a lot of sense. I would like to see it happen. I think Vlatko Andonivoski also would like to see that happen as well. Especially because you don't know what's going to come out of these games and how the rehabilitation is going to go for Alyssa Nair, and looking at something like ahead a little bit to those October friendlies. And maybe thinking a little bit about that window of time as well, like who you're going to call in for that alongside maybe a Campbell, a French, and or a Nair who may or may not be up to par by then. So I would like to see that coming out of these games for sure. I hope that there is, some more rotation. I know some people during the actual Olympics, as the tournament was going on, weren't huge fans of the constant rotation. They felt that kind of maybe contributed to some disjointed, choppy soccer from the United States women's national team. But when it comes to moments like this, exhibition games in an international window, mix it up. I'm here for it. Let's see it. I'm excited about it.